Well, hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Greg Olsen, and I'm the director of the New York State Office for Aging. I'm absolutely thrilled to have a friend of mine, Esther Greenhouse, with us today, who is the CEO of Silver to Gold Strategic Consulting, and I'll introduce her more formally in a second. You're going to hear a lot of concepts today: aging in place, the built environment, enabling design. So let's first talk about what aging in place really is. It's not applicable just to older adults. It's about one's ability to age where they would like to age, and the built environment, your housing, etc., is critically important to whether you can successfully do that or not. Design features of homes, roads, bridges, public spaces, buildings, and so on and so forth, literally can make the difference between your ability to age in place or not. According to New York State Health Department data, for almost every age group, the home is the most dangerous place, resulting in the most emergency room visits and hospitalizations due to falls, injuries, or injuries as a result of falls. Plan on Aging, which was contained in this year's budget, as well as a 5-year, $25 billion housing plan. Enabling design and the built environment need to be key features of that. So let me introduce to you again, Esther Greenhouse, who is the CEO of Silver to Gold Strategic Consulting. She is a built environment strategist and an environmental gerontologist, bringing nearly 30 years of experience in a unique constellation of expertise in design, gerontology, environmental psychology, and planning. She helps communities and organizations solve multiple real problems through one lens, the enabling design approach. This was the foundation of AARP International's Equity by Design initiative for creating, enabling, and equitable housing and multi-generational communities, which she co-developed. Her expertise has been sought for co-authoring the American Planning Association's first Aging and Community Policy Guide and on the design of the United States' first senior-focused emergency department. Esther has served as the strategic director for one of the nation's first age-friendly centers of excellence here in New York, and for years taught the National Association of Home Builders Certified Aging in Place Specialist, which is also called CAPS course. And I think that that's great, Esther, because we are just about to go to contract with the National Association of Home Builders to get 150 of our case managers CAPS certified. So first and foremost, thank you so much for being here today. This is going to be great.
Thank you for having me, Greg. Oh, and I am thrilled to start off this discussion with such great news. I've been a big advocate of the CAPS program for years. One of the things that I find when I go out and I work with communities, or I'm working with organizations, or speaking at a conference, is when the discussion gets to housing, someone invariably gets up and says, what are the builders doing? What are the builders thinking? And oftentimes it's somebody who is in the aging services space that sees the impact of the status quo of how we fail to design for the lifespan and how it's a barrier to helping people age in place successfully. And then I always respond by asking, well, do you know about the Certified Aging in Place Specialist program? Who in your community has attained that designation and is incorporating it into their work? And typically, the aging services professions and even people who work for agencies in a community are unaware of CAPS, and that they have CAPS builders and ODs, other professionals right there in their community. So
well,
bravo
you're
to
absolutely
you.
right. And I learned about that from you years ago. And it was always on my mind because we have a lot of case managers and staff that go into homes and can really make a difference. And so we will be the first state in the country to have a formal partnership with the National Association of Home Builders to do exactly that. So I appreciate you being here to share your experience. We have some real good visuals too, so that folks that are listening can really see and get a taste of what it is exactly that you're talking about. But let's start at the beginning. What is the work that you do and why do you do it?
So actually, I don't do work. This is a mission. I really believe that I was put here at this time on this mission, and that mission is to radically improve the impact of design on people's physical and financial well-being as they age through easy changes to our housing and our neighborhoods. And I do this work for a variety of reasons. And I'm on this mission for a variety of reasons. So one is that I believe that it is completely unacceptable and intolerable that the design of our housing stock disables people as they age, and it unnecessarily creates forced frailty and increases the likelihood that a person might actually be evicted by the design of their own home. I do this also because my grandmother was evicted by design from our family home when I was a child. She was using a walker because she had rheumatoid arthritis, and she couldn't get in and out of the bathroom independently because the doorways were too narrow. And that was a time when nobody thought about home modifications, and she ended up moving to a facility where her life really changed. You also mentioned the enabling design approach. So as a response to what exists in our country, and actually in many places around the world, but in response to the fact that we fail to design for the lifespan, I've created a response, and that response is the enabling design approach. And the enabling design approach considers key aspects. So for example, one key aspect is it's rooted in theory. I have a background in academia, and what the environmental docility hypothesis was something from academia that I feel just needs to be applied in society. Everybody needs to know about it. If you talk to your OTs in a community, most of them will know about it. But really, all people who are have a role in decision making, whether it's leaders of a municipality, and certainly developers and architects and builders need to know about this. But this environmental docility hypothesis, which has a lot of research behind it, and there's a lot of text behind it, can be distilled very simply to its essence, which is the fit between a person and their environment. And when there's optimal fit or goodness of fit, then a person can function at their highest level and be as independent as possible. And that's what we want for everyone. Unfortunately, when there's poor fit, there's a struggle for the person to adapt to their environment, and that leads to dependence. So this in and of itself is really interesting, but when you look at this in relation to the fact that the status quo of how we've designed our nation's housing, as you described, our whole infrastructure, the neighborhoods, transportation systems, the status quo is flawed. And that is because our data and our conventions and our codes are such that we've created a nation that is ideal for a subset of the population. And what I mean by that is that what we've created works really well if you're a 5'9", which is average height, approximately 5'9" male, and you have the highest physical, cognitive, and sensory abilities. So that means that we've really created a society that's ideal for average height men between the ages of 20 and 40. So I will never fit into that category. I'm 5'1.5". I have sensory processing disorder. I have visual processing disorders. And I will never meet that ideal. So I'm always struggling to adapt to the environment. Now, that struggle might be really minor, like, oh, if I sit down, Greg, at your desk, for example, I might have a hard time using the workstation. But because we're more aware today, I'm probably going to be able to adjust things, like adjust the height of the chair. But in terms of designing, or rather in terms of adjusting the design of our homes or communities, it's not so easy to make a change. I also often say, I used to teach at Cornell in the Department of Design and Environmental Analysis, and I often say that if my students had designed our world the way it is, I would either fail them or ask them to redo the project. And probably I'd ask them to redo it. Because I know with a little direction, they'd excel. But essentially, the enabling design approach is understanding that the way we design and build makes a huge impact on how people function. And we've been doing it in a way that's really exclusive, and that has negative consequences. So we need to consider the economic impact on individuals, families, and communities, because the more I'm disabled by my home and the more I'm dependent, the more I need services to help me thrive.
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating when you talk about who the built environment is for, right? That is not the general population, and you can't fit a square peg in a round hole. And what an opportunity we have, not only being the first age-friendly state in New York, going through the master plan on aging, all the downtown revitalization, smart growth initiatives to really create livable communities. At the centerpiece of this is the built environment. So, Esther, what is the biggest misconception about aging in place, and what are the key concepts that we need to get right?
Okay, there are actually several misconceptions about aging in place. I recently wrote an article published on LinkedIn that was titled "Aging in Place is Not the Answer." And I have been a proponent of aging in place since I first started studying these concepts as an undergrad. So I'm a big believer in aging in place. The issue is that all of the efforts and programs that say, let's help people age in place, are missing the fact that well over 90% of older adults are already doing it. People are aging in place because it's the default. So unless you choose to move or you're forced to move, you're going to age in place. So what we really need to focus on is to help people successfully age in place. No one should be forced to move from their home because it wasn't properly designed for the lifespan. So another key misconception is around home modifications. So home modifications are potentially incredibly valuable. They can make the difference between somebody remaining in their home or moving. But for most people, they come too late. It's after a person has already been disabled by the design of their home. And this is because of the norm of how we design and build, that it's biased. We don't design for the true needs over the lifespan. Another issue when you start looking at home modifications is who's going to pay for it? You know, if I am in retirement and I'm on a fixed income, I'm supposed to draw from my retirement savings, if I have them, to reconstruct my home, which was not designed properly in the first place. So we really need to shift how we design our housing stock in the beginning.
Yep. So Roger's going to pull up just some of the, the visuals to exactly what you're talking about.
Great.
So, we're going to put in the chat now. You have a video linked on your website, and you mentioned this, and I really love the terminology of forced frailty or eviction by design when you talk about the example of your grandmother. And so, just go through that again for the folks that are either listening live or will be in the coming weeks, because I think it's really important. And also that there's been a lot of enabling features in general society from the way ketchup is now, right? It's upside down to the
Yes.
door handle we just saw. But go through that again, because I find that those terminologies fascinating. Also in the context of everybody's, for the most part, is already aging in place. It's whether it's successful or not, which can lead then again to the forced frailty, or as you say, the eviction by design, especially when our housing stock is late 50s for the most part.
Right. So yeah, I love that. I love that you brought up things that are common in society now, thoughtful design that really understands people's behaviors. So, that's something also related to your previous question about misconception and concepts, is that we are very ageist in our society. Aging or being old is a 4-letter word, unfortunately. And what I often encourage people to do is not necessarily think about age, but think about needs and behaviors. So a big one is behaviors. When you bring up the example of the ketchup bottle, that relates to, well, the properties of the ketchup as well as the behavior of use. The example of the lever door handle, a lever door handle is just such a more efficient, effective, thoughtful, successful design than a round doorknob. And I love to give the example that, friends of mine and colleagues who don't have hands or don't have the use of their hand or arm are disabled by a round doorknob, but if there's a lever door handle, they can depress it and open the door. Service dogs can be trained to use a lever door handle. If I'm carrying packages, a laundry basket, a sleeping child, I can use my elbow to activate, to depress the lever and open the door. So there's a lot of power there in really thoughtful design. You asked about some of the terms I used. So I coined the term forced frailty because when I was really reflecting on why I'm on this mission and what happened to my grandmother, I realized that that's really what's happening, that we are forcing people into frailty. Now, this is not to say that some people aren't going to become frail due to illness, due to chronic disease, due to other circumstances. But the issue is that there's this huge component of our well-being as we age that we have an influence over that we're not paying enough attention to. When you mentioned the other term, eviction by design, that's also a term that I coined, and it refers to the fact that thousands to millions of people have the experience where they are actually required to move out of their home of choice into a facility or other housing because the design of their home failed to meet their needs across the lifespan. Like, I'm saying it now for the millionth time in my life, and it still is hitting me right here, because how does this make sense that we're doing this? We know better now. And my mission is to make sure that everyone who's in a decision-making capacity and all the wonderful professionals who design and build and develop our housing and communities are also aware of this, because I want everybody to understand that the power that they have in the choices they make, we can literally enable people to thrive rather than disable them and force them unnecessarily into frailty.
Yeah, and also, Esther, like planning ahead. You'd be so proud of my 18-year-old daughter. She is thinking about, she's going off to college, but she's already thinking about the house she wants to buy. And my father, who's 80, is on one floor, wide doorways, different level for electric, different levels in terms of countertop. She's thinking about that. Like, I need to make sure that I'm in a home like this, so as I age, I am not forcibly eviction by design. So can you provide so I think we need to do that as well. Like this is the topic we're talking about because we're the Office for Aging and because you've been on a mission because of what happened to your grandmother. This is not just about older adults. It is absolutely inclusive of older adults, but this is across the age spectrum and ability. So can you give an example of an enabling design approach and how that helped somebody not just age in place, but back to your term, successfully age in place?
Yes. So thank you for sharing that. That makes me feel terrific. So I would say that my greatest success story and case study is actually my mom and the design of her home. And Roger, if you want to put up the slide of me in that bright pink dress with the petite older lady in white, that's my mom. That picture is actually about 8 years old. And, you know, because of my grandmother's situation, and, you know, my grandmother was extremely fortunate. She moved into a skilled nursing facility that was 10 minutes from our home. We visited her regularly. She was very well cared for. But there was still a lot left to be desired, and she did not want to leave her home. And in my mother's case, about 11 years ago, my mother realized that she should move closer to me and my family so that as she aged, we could support her in making that a successful endeavor. So my husband happens to be a custom home builder. And of course, I have expertise in design for older adults. So we actually designed and built a house for my mom to enable her to successfully age in place. And when you look at the house from the outside, you see this cute keypad. There's nothing about it that indicates that anything was done to design for frailty or for old people. So if you go inside, you really don't notice anything different because these things don't have to look different. You know, that's why I say that I'm on a mission to radically change how people are impacted. But the way to do that is really simple and really easy. And it doesn't look radically different. So it was really fascinating because when my mom moved in, she had movers bring her belongings here, and they ended up through circumstance arriving late at night. It was about 9 o'clock at night when they started moving things in the house. And the first thing they said was, oh my gosh, we love this house. It's so easy to move things into because of the wider doorways, and there's no change in level, even from one room to another. So that made us feel terrific. But what it's done for my mother is it's enabled her to remain in her home of choice for as long as possible. I estimate that through simple design features, we have saved my mom and the family over $500,000 by delaying the need for her to move to a care facility. We have also saved her money because the home is enabling, she doesn't need as much care from aides, from paid caregivers. So that's another way to save her money. What did we do? Again, nothing was radical. It's really the thinking that's radical. So wider doorways, no change in level from one room to another. Simple things like lever door handles, thinking about contrasting colors, the floor, for example, to the wall, thoughtful access from her bedroom through a closet. Instead of a walk-in closet, this is a walk-through closet, which leads to her bathroom. For her, we included grab bars. And the only thing that she refused to do that we advised for was, we said, you should have a 0-step shower. And she was insisting, I can step over the curb in that shower, the one that she had picked out. And she kept saying, I can do it. And I said, I know, but if there's ever a time you can't, you don't want it to be an issue. But in addition, it's not even if there's ever a time you can't. I always say that who needs to step up and down in a wet, slippery environment? You know, unless we have no choice and we're stepping over a bathtub wall, we really shouldn't be put in that situation. So unfortunately, for my mom, because that was the choice she made quite a number of years ago, she needed to hire a home health aide to bathe her when I wasn't available, you know, to supplement the care we were giving her. So my mom, unfortunately, my mom is moving into assisted living in a few weeks because her needs are changing. Her dementia is progressing. And fortunately, we found a wonderful facility where I know she'll reap the benefits of living in that type of setting. The constant access to care, having 3 meals a day at set times, giving a schedule, being around other people and not being isolated. So those are a lot of the advantages of living in a facility or living in a community that's designed for older adults. But again, through very simple design features, like including wider doorways, we enabled my mom to live at home until it really wasn't in her best interest to remain there.
And I'm surprised she didn't go with the bathtub, because I tell you, I love it. Where you see them now is in hotels, where you don't have to step over. You can just walk right in, and regardless of your age, I agree with you. The bathroom is a very dangerous and slippery place. So that's something that I wish I had in my house, but certainly will in the future. Roger, can you pull up some of the community slides? So we talked about the home and some of those enabling design features. Now let's talk a little bit about the community and enabling design approach that has helped the community, because there's a lot of places that, you know, people might walk or ride their bike or use their walker. They have businesses, there's restaurants, there's schools, there's public transport, all of those things that you mentioned, and why this isn't a one or the other. This is the entire built environment.
That's right. So ideally, people are not just remaining in their home. Ideally, people are getting out and are involved in the community. So we need to think about how we're designing, you know, and if you look at some of these examples, I put up the saying, the text, not designed for people. So Roger, let's stay on this slide of the crosswalk. There's so much exciting work being done in terms of transportation and civic design in terms of roadways. If anybody's interested, I actually read the NACTO design guides because they're just visually so fascinating and they lay out a lot of solutions. So this was a roadway. There's 4 lanes of traffic here, or travel for vehicles. And then there's also 2 lanes for parking. So that's 6 lanes that we have to cross. So you think about crossing this, and clearly, if we're concerned about older adults and age-friendly communities, as we age, it's very common for us to maybe need more time with a task. So imagine that I'm an older adult like my mom who has some balance issues. So I'm using a walker to cross this intersection. I'm going to feel really vulnerable, and it's going to take me quite a bit of time. But in addition, if we think about the mom who's trying to cross this roadway with 2 kids and a cart full of groceries, it's really not designed for her either. So there are a lot of exciting things that are being done to make that intersection smaller, like have what are called bump outs or bulb curbs, where the curbs actually come further into the intersection. So a person is in the actual crosswalk for less amount of time. So there's a lot on the community level that can be done.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. If anybody drives around New York State, we have a lot of municipalities that have adopted complete streets legislation. We see a lot of roundabouts. You see a lot of green space and curbs in the middle of what used to be a 2-lane, which is now 1 lane. The traffic's going slower, but it's actually speeding up because there's no lights anymore. Then you have a bike lane, much easier to, and of course, curb cuts. So, it's much safer. It's safer for the pedestrian, safer for the person driving, and has shown to, again, reduce accidents and things like that. We see a lot of that going on around New York State. So I mentioned earlier, we became the first age-friendly state in the country in 2016, but have been working on a lot of these features for, over a decade now. So, you were part of your community's Age-Friendly Center of Excellence, which was a partnership between our office, the Department of State, Department of Health, Health Foundation of Western and Central New York. Why should a community consider being an age-friendly community?
So I would respond with, why shouldn't they? Why on earth would you not want to be welcoming, enabling for people of all ages and be inclusive of people's needs as they age? That's
right.
That's first and foremost.
Yep, and the opportunity again with mixed use housing. So you don't have to rely on your automobile. You have the opportunity to socialize. You have access to transportation options. You have access to healthcare, civic, cultural things, parks, open space, like all those things that went away after World War II when suburbia was developed right here on Long Island. And now, people are trying to get back to a more, intergenerational mixed use community where you have a much better opportunity to stay engaged and succeed. It's interesting here where I live outside of Albany, they built a rail trail on the old, railroad tracks, and these types of trails are being linked all over the state of New York to create one big trail. But the reason I'm raising that is once they built it, it is packed with kids, with middle-aged individuals, with older adults, and they're bike riding and rollerblading and walking, and they're getting out and socializing. If you build it, they're going to come, or they're going to choose to go somewhere else that does have these features, right?
100%. Yes. Yeah. And, to further answer your question, I don't know how many people who are listening know the history of age friendly, but it was in approximately 2007 that the World Health Organization recognized the aging of so many societies in our world, and also recognized that we have not prepared for that, and not only in terms of design of the built environment, but in terms of policy and programming. And so I always encourage communities that at the very least, they should explore the countless resources from the World Health Organization and from AARP, which leads the age-friendly movement in this country. I'll also give you an example of a community that I worked with. I worked with a county for about 6 to 9 months that was struggling because they had sustained in-migration over years of people 60 and older. So they had a demographic imbalance or an age imbalance. They also had a lot of housing that was very high-end vacation properties. So that skewed the housing market. So there were these issues that were really shaping things. They were impacting who could afford housing, which impacted who could live in the community, which impacted businesses because they did not have enough employees to run. And I worked with them to review their the data about their community, the zoning, their programs and policies. And we created an event. It was a half-day workshop where the first thing I did was help them understand the enabling design approach, that you have to, in order to develop solutions that are really relevant and really effective, you can't be missing a huge portion. So you have to understand that the way we've designed and built is causing a lot of problems that you're trying to then fix. But in addition, we did a community assessment that looked at, well, what's working in the community and what's not. And then we did consensus building to focus on what priorities are key. And this ended up with the League of Women Voters in the county taking charge and creating an age-friendly community to research age-friendly. It led to the county applying for a pilot grant for a special bus route to meet needs of older adults. And that was so successful that they eventually got permanent funding. And it also led to more collaboration between their Office for Aging and a not-for-profit that was attempting to meet the needs of older adults. So they identified where are we unnecessarily overlapping and where are the gaps. So combining the enabling design approach and age-friendly, these are really resources that can help communities enable individuals, families, and the community itself to thrive.
Yeah, and these aren't just concepts, these are proven. This stuff works. So I'm going to ask you one more question before we go. You covered a lot today. It's crystal clear in my head, but I want to ask you, what is the most important takeaway for those individuals and organizations that are listening today or will be when we post this? What do you want them to leave with?
So it's most important that people recognize that design has the power to disable or enable. The built environment is going to impact the way people function. And do you want it to impact them negatively, or do you want them to be impacted positively? And we can leverage specific design features to enable people to retain their physical and financial well-being as they age and really enable them to thrive.
Yep, there's no downside. There's no downside to the individual in those areas. There's no downside to the not-for-profits that have to, again, pick up the pieces, so to speak, when folks are evicted or they have design features that make them frail, those two terms that you coined. And certainly the state and municipalities all over the state have a stake in this as well, because our overall goal is to improve population health and make New York State the best place to grow up and grow old. So, Esther, it is so great that you joined us today. Keep up the mission. 30 years of your expertise shared with us today. I really appreciate that. And certainly the visuals, because I really think it helps people, go from concept when we're talking to really seeing that, there's a lot of things that you talked about that have developed into the mainstream. And now we need to continue to push that out both into, the apartments, retrofitting buildings, building new buildings, and then obviously the community with age-friendly and the master plan. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I want to thank Kelly Matija and Roger Noyes from my communications department that always seem to make these productions flawless. And we'll see you guys next week when we kick off Pride Month, which is in June. So thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Greg.